Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Friday day 2 of our 2025 annual conference. Hopefully we'll have more people streaming in during our breakfast session this morning, but I'm here with a little panel and we're going to talk about socialization and Duchenne and Becker muscular dystrophy and making friends and building long-lasting relationships and relationships that have meaning and value. So for those of you that don't know me, my name is Patrick Motion, and I once upon a time thought I had Becker muscular dystrophy, but I live with limb-girdle muscular dystrophy, but I was still allowed to stay in the club because Pat Furlong didn't kick me out. And I work with a group of adults living with Duchenne and Becker, and we are known as the PAC, the PPMD Adult Advisory Committee. And I'm joined by one of our committee members this morning and two wonderful women from our Duchenne community. So I want to introduce our panelists, and then we're going to kind of have an open roundtable discussion, and we're going to talk about building friendships. So first I have my friend Aditya, who is a PAC member, and I'll let him introduce himself and talk a little bit about where he's from and what he does for work, and yeah.
Oh, hey, my name is Aditya Nair. I'm from Tampa, Florida, and currently for work, I work full-time for Lockheed Martin as a in-flight space software engineer, and yeah.
Yeah, and I'm going to get back to you with some questions about your smart person job.
Okay.
Because you're actually working on like moon landing, docking mechanisms and stuff that's going to happen in Mars, which is outstanding. So probably the smartest person on the stage.
I don't know about
Not
that.
to slight you guys, but he's definitely brighter than me. Glad to have you along. And this is also your first, is this your first, no, you were at the conference last year. Right?
No, my parents were.
Oh, your parents
I
were.
was a dad with a few weeks.
Right, this is your first conference.
Yeah,
So this is the first time we're meeting in person. Great.
Yeah.
Excellent. Glad to have you with us
Glad
this
to be
morning.
here, yeah.
Awesome. And we have Jill Castle, and Jill, I'll let her introduce herself too, but I've known Jill for close to 25 years now. We're both a little bit more gray and wrinkly. Well, speak for me, you still look the same, you're not aging. Jill, please tell us where you're from, what you do, and your connection to the community. And good morning.
Good morning. Oh, it's on. Okay, good. Hi, I'm Jill Castle, and for those of you who haven't met me, I've been around. I think we just figured out this is my 22nd conference. My son is getting ready to turn 26. His name's Anthony. And I work in the field. I support families with education and behavioral issues, and I have for the last 20 years. I've also worked out in the real world with education and behavior for the state of Arizona. I'm from Phoenix, and also on a national level.
Love it. Awesome. And Anthony, Jill's son Anthony, is also on the PAC, and we're going to talk about how that helps to build social and friendships. This is not a commercial for my program that I run, but we will get some time in. And then we have the lovely Jen Schwartz. Jen, you've also been part of the community for a bit. Tell us a little bit about your connections and origins.
Yeah, absolutely. My name is Jen Schwartz. I live in Des Moines, Iowa with my husband, and we have 3 children. I have a 16-year-old daughter who came to conference this year, and then my 12-year-old son with Duchenne stayed home, and my 9-year-old stayed home. My 12-year-old is headed to camp soon, and then my 9-year-old's playing baseball, so Dad stayed home to manage there. But we came into the community 9 years ago with Ben's diagnosis and really found amazing information and a great community, and so we've been to conference ever since.
Awesome, love it. And so we're gonna jump right in. I'm gonna kind of seed with a few questions, but it's really gonna be more conversational and sharing some stories and anecdotes and hopefully tips and tricks that can help the community, because this is a huge topic, right? We get the diagnosis and we're all obviously devastated, and then you realize that the sky is not falling immediately and you have to pick up the pieces, and now you have to raise a child, but you have a child that has this rare illness, and you are not trained, and you are just drafted in, and you have to figure all this out and navigate all this stuff, but at the same time, you want your son to have a fulfilling experience as he's growing up through school. So let's kind of start with the beginning stuff. How did you kind of put together the plan in your head of, well, as the young man is growing up, there's going to be differences between his peers in school. How do we navigate? Let's talk the school situation first. And I'd love to get the parent perspective, and then Aditya, I'll ask you after, how did you kind of go about doing things your own with tips from your parents, and when did you listen and say okay, and when did you be like, yeah, whatever, Ma, leave me alone, right? So Jill or Jen, you want to take that? Like, what was the plan like going into school?
Great question. We decided very early on that we wanted to talk as open and honestly with Ben's friends as we could at an age-appropriate level. Actually, the first conference I went to, Jill, you presented on taking in fire boots and having the kids run in those. Ben happened to have an uncle that he loved dearly, and he was a firefighter in our city. So he came in with all his fire gear. Ben felt like $1 million because his uncle was there, and we had the kids run in the fire boots, and it was really a light bulb for the other kids to say, oh, well, I know why Ben can't run as fast as I can. And we did that every year through all of his elementary years, but we'd modify what we were talking about. So we started with the fire boots when they were little. Then we brought Tootsie Pops and Dum Dums and said, you know, on the outside they look the same, but on the inside they're a little bit different, and they're both really good. They're just a little bit different. And then when Ben got to upper elementary, he started leading the presentation more himself. So he helped put together the slide deck. He talked about some cool experiences that he's had because he's had Duchenne and is able to do something like our local football team had a day for special needs, and so he got to go meet the coach and got to kick a football with the team. So he thought that was really cool and wanted to share those things. So we tried to talk with his classroom fairly openly about here are some of the things that you're going to see are different, and here are some of the things that are absolutely the same. So I think that set a good early conversation. I was always surprised when I'd come into the classroom, the questions the kids would ask me. Some of them were really great questions, and some of them were like, can Ben have pop, like soda? And I was like, great question. No, doesn't affect them at all. But it was something that was on their mind, and so I'm glad they had the opportunity to ask. So that's how we started through those early elementary years.
I think before I get to Jill, I just want to raise the point that when you said, you know, can he have pop? We, I think, have a perception as the community. You know, we read about the condition and we get so educated so quickly, and we realize that for the kids, it's got really nothing to do with the medical stuff. They just want to know like what's going on, and once they know, they don't care. It's totally gone, and they're like, well, well, okay, so we can still play, right? Let's go play. So I think that's a really good point. That, you know, you may have this thing as a parent of like, oh man, like my kid's gonna be treated like glass. That's your perception of it, but they're just like, you know, can you drink pop? And I'm from New England, so to me, pop is what you do when someone gets you mad in the bar. You pop them. So, Jill, what about you? Because I know you had a cool elementary experience with the fire stuff, and how did that all come about?
Oh, yeah. So we, first of all, I will say that with kids, it's just the fear of the unknown. And I've been doing this not just for my own son, but other families, like showing other families. There's also like a spaghetti science experiment that we would do when they get older. But I always have found that as soon as you educate the friends, most all of them are wonderful. So it really is about just letting them know that there's nothing to be afraid of. That's what I found as well. We did a lot of cool things in elementary, like, you know, he couldn't play on the playground like the other kids, so I'd found out what everybody's favorite game at the time was. I'm old, so this was a long time ago, but it was like Heads Up or something, and I sent it in, and a couple of the girls wanted to play, so all of a sudden everybody would be playing with him at a picnic table with whatever games I sent in. We'd do lunch bunches where I'd bring Chick-fil-A for all the kids that would help him the most throughout the week or the month, and we'd sponsor a lunch for them. So we did do some like marketing things to help him out a little bit. But then he just sort of took on his own way and found his own way. The difference with Anthony and some of our other boys is that my biggest hurdle as a parent with him socially was not the Duchenne. It was the speech delay and the struggle with communication and some of the spectrum-like behaviors. And so that is how I got into behavior, because I wanted to learn so I could help. So it was more about teaching him to advocate and communicate and make friends, and that was a little bit more on the forefront than the physical part. But he did find his own way. He loved to hike, and he ended up, really taking off and doing all these hikes, and people came out of the woodworks to help carry him, and he just found his own unique sort of way, and we just let him drive that, which was really hard because I was pretty controlling.
Can you unpack that a little? Can you unpack that a little bit more about, you say he found his own way. Was that, do you think, a little bit later, middle school or adolescence, or how do you, you just almost described it as kind of a light switch and he found his own way, and I'm sure it wasn't that direct. Is there anything you can point out to the fact that he started to take it over?
Yeah, it might have been when I started listening. That might have been the difference, because maybe he always had his own way. I just wasn't listening. I was too busy trying to get him to do it my way. And I would look around at all the other kids and see what was popular and what was hip and try to get him to do the things that everybody was doing. And I didn't know any better. I just thought that's what you did. And it wouldn't work. And so the more that it wouldn't work, basically the whole situation kind of wore me down, and I just threw my hands up and was like, all right, what do you want to do? And then that worked. That's when it worked. And so I think he always loved adventure ever since he was little. He's so adventurous. We always joke that if he was able-bodied, I would never see him. He would just be gone all the time, climbing things and adventuring. And so we just decided to take what he loved and put a creative spin on it and let him lead, rather than me try to manufacture what was happening. And I think that's when it changed.
That's a perfect segue into the question for Aditya. Tell us a little bit about how, when you entered school, your parents kind of influencing you and talking to you about this or that or helping you out at school, to when you decided to say, I'm going to listen to this, I'm not going to listen to that. Or like Jill said, when did you decide?
For me, I always just listened to them until I graduated high school. And then for college, I had to move out. And when I lived in a dorm, that's when I really started to develop my personality even more. I was able to become more outgoing, and I feel like I had to be more outgoing because I had to have my caregivers help me out in particular ways, or approach other students, when you're doing group work and stuff like that. So I had to push my boundaries while I was in college. So that really helped me develop. I think up until I moved out, I was really sheltered and I was fine just being alone. But when I moved out, I was I have to make my own friend circle and everything. So I really blossomed after I left home.
So tell us a little bit more about your younger school experience. Did you kind of have the same situation where a lot of your peers and classmates were asking you questions and things like that? And how did you deal with making friends and navigating through elementary and middle school?
So I realized when I was in elementary, middle school, or even high school, people weren't too curious about what was going on with me. So no one really approached me. And then when little kids ask me what's wrong, I just tell them I was fighting Optimus Prime. So it's something playful that I do. But in in my school era, I think my parents really prioritized getting the educational aspect of it, getting extra time and all that. But yeah.
Well, it's interesting too. Just we can have a whole other panel on the frame of society. But when you said kids ask you what's wrong, I taught middle school for 30 years.
Yeah.
And I always would tell them there's nothing wrong. I don't have anything wrong with me.
Okay.
This is exactly the way I'm supposed to be.
Okay.
And let's talk about that. So instantly it was take the fear away, right? Because we're taught if someone is using a wheelchair, they must have just a sad life, which is not true at all,
Yeah,
right?
correct.
So I want to stick on you for a second. You talked about pushing your boundaries and blossoming out when you went to college.
Yeah.
Before you actually went to college, what made you decide to live on campus, and what were you most afraid of?
So what made me decide to live on campus was I did my research and I went to University of Florida, which is the second most accessible college in America. And then like they have it was really inclusive. They had like a sling system all the way from the bed, all the way to the toilet, the shower.
In the dorm?
Yeah, in the dorm.
Wow, that's cool.
And they had people that would come in to like adjust the height of any furniture that was already present to make it more accommodating. And then on the floor underneath the dorm, there was a place where the caretakers could just chill and rest. So it was like made around, you know, like people who need around the clock care.
Okay.
So that was one reason. And another reason I left was I wanted to move out. I wanted to see what it's like to live on my own. So, and yeah, those are the two reasons.
So what were you nervous? I mean, you know, it must have been obviously a huge transition because we all know too, Duchenne, neuromuscular dystrophy, time never stands still, right?
Yeah.
So there's always this progression and the progressive thought of like, well, I'm going to move out to college, but 4 years from now, I may have more needs than now.
Yeah.
So what, if you don't mind me asking, like, what was on your mind as far as nerves and/or did you talk to mom and dad? Because same question coming up for you guys. You know, it's kind of a time in life when you kind of let go of your kid a little bit. When your kid has challenging medical needs, it's a little harder to do that. So how did that work with the family dynamic, and what were you scared at all, or were you just like, forget it, I'm going?
To be honest, I was actually quite excited because it's the first opportunity I had to live on my own. My dad, he was okay with it. My mom was a lot more hesitant. Like the first year I was there, they would drive 2 hours and come meet me every week, you know, because they were so afraid of, my mom was so afraid of me being so far away. But I wasn't nervous. I was excited. It was going to be a nice change for me.
So you talk about, Jill talked about perception, right? So his mom, nervous Nellie, and your parents did not travel with you, right, to this conference?
No, they did not.
Right.
Yeah.
So you're here with your buddy?
Yeah.
Okay, and I know he's in the front row here.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll get to you in a minute. But different perception, right? So your mom was extremely nervous.
Yeah.
That probably something could go wrong, anything could go wrong, everything would go wrong.
Yeah.
But in your mind, you were like, let me just go and explore, and I'll deal with it as things come up. Same thing for, I know, Jen, your son's a little younger, and Jill, your son's a little older. How did that feel when you said Anthony, started to find his way, or your son's growing up, where you feel like, well, how can I really let go when all these other challenges are there that he's going to need some help? How does that affect the social?
Yeah, I can start. This last year, Ben is in 6th grade, and so his friends have started playing club basketball and baseball. And we have a great group of parents who are willing to help Ben travel to those sports. So he will leave early in the morning. He'll come home late at night, going with his friends and the team. And when we start talking about the week, I'm like, okay, Ben, so who's going to help you load your chair? If you need some help with this, what are you going to do? He's like, Mom, I got it. I'm like, all right. So I let him troubleshoot that. They're pretty small things. It was a low-risk environment where I let him run with it. I did text the mom on the back end to say, okay, here's the things I'm thinking about. Ben says he's good with them, but just keep an eye out if you need anything. So he's gone through some of those scenarios, and it's worked out great. I'm still at home checking his location, wondering, where has he been, and how's it going. But same thing I do for my 16-year-old daughter who doesn't have any physical limitations. So I've tried to start that in middle school at a lower risk place. So then as he does get older, we'll feel more comfortable, and more importantly, he'll feel confident going to those situations. He also does a great job of asking his friends for help. So this year they went trick-or-treating, and he was like in a big blow-up dinosaur costume, which he was super excited about, but not really easy to get around. And we got home that night, and he went out with his friends independently, and he said, Mom, I feel bad. My friends had to help me in and out of my chair a lot. And I said, well, you know what? Why don't you just send him a message and say, hey, thanks for helping me tonight. I really appreciate it. I really don't think that his friends minded doing that, but I was glad that he was thoughtful of it and just gave the appreciation to them for helping him. him in and out. And his friends are pretty honest. I think they'd tell him if he was wearing them down for the night, and let's figure out a different situation. But I was glad that he was thoughtful of that and then could share back appreciation for those who are able to help him with it.
What I think a great point of that is he's acknowledging the fact that, there's an elephant in the room here. You guys are going to have to help me out. And they're giving back by saying, look, we're not hanging out with the condition, we're hanging out with you. So if this is what it takes for us to have a good time, that's what we're going to do. So, and Jill, talk to us a little bit about, again, Anthony's adventures, because I know I've seen some amazing videos. You're not carrying up the mountain. So how does that all work?
So first I want to go back to, because I just really got choked up when you said that you said to somebody, there's nothing wrong with me, this is exactly how I'm supposed to be. I mean, that just hit me really hard because I think some of the overbearing mom stuff that I did was because on some deeper level, I sort of felt sorry for him, That's really hard to say, but I did. I just wanted him to be able to be like everybody else, but he was never supposed to be like everybody else. He's so special and so unique just the way he is. It took me so long to figure that out and change my behavior because I think I was sending a message that he wasn't okay by being overbearing, right? So I thought I was protecting him, but I really wasn't because I wasn't teaching him to just follow his own path. So I did get that figured out. And when we did the hikes, one of the pivotal moments that I had, because I just threw up on Facebook, hey, my son wants to get to the bottom of the Grand Canyon. I don't know how we're going to do this. A few of us are going to, I was so naive, a few of us are going to carry him. And if you want to be involved, come on out. We're going to practice blah, blah, blah. And so every week we would come out to practice, more and more people would show up. And more people that I had never met would come out. It was absolutely incredible. So the story seemed to be like, oh, this is great for this kid to get down to the bottom of the Grand Canyon, which no one had ever done in a wheelchair or being carried. But that wasn't really the most beautiful part of the story. The most beautiful part of the story was all these people that would show up. And I remember at that moment, I was going through that transition, and I had to get really honest with myself, and I realized that I was in fear of my son being a burden, right? So I was going to mitigate that whatever way I could. Like such faulty thinking now that I look back, because somebody said to me, do you not get that when you let us carry him, you are changing our lives? Like, you are not allowing him to have the impact he's supposed to have on everybody else when you don't let other people help and learn how to help him. Like, this is serving them. And that changed everything for me. I saw my son in a different light. I saw my son as this complete person that is here, that is really here to help and change other people and impact other people. And it just made me be able to start thinking about that my life was important too.
I love all of those answers, and I have said for years, I think on some level, living with this condition is harder on the people around us on some levels, because we accept and we know what's going on and we have nothing to compare it to. So you may look and say, oh man, I can't understand what it would be like to be using a wheelchair so often or all the time. For us, there are no other options, so we simply adjust because we have to. There's nothing else. So we all have our moments of anger and sadness and the cycle of grief, right? That goes over and over again. But when we reach acceptance, it's really not that big a deal. And to add to that, as the kids are growing up, again, I think this is a societal thing, not us, but when day comes for the power wheelchair, it's like, oh man, this is a huge step. This is awful, like this is, things are getting worse. But for us, it's a treatment, and it's an effective treatment. And I remember being very nervous that I was always gonna get knocked over, or I had to have people around me, or right, you're worried about falling. Once you have the chair, you have all this independence again. So it actually reverses, and it's like, oh man, I don't have to worry about a lot of stuff. So Aditya, I want to ask you about, again, your college experience. did you feel at any time like your helpers and caregivers and stuff, or people, did you ever feel that like, man, I'm a burden, like this is, you know, my parents are out of the picture, I gotta do this myself?
Yeah.
Or were you just kind of like, nope, whatever, back with it, I need help?
I mean, I slowly worked my way out of it. Before college, I was shameful at asking people to help me out. I felt bad, I felt guilty, but I realized that people, they don't mind at all helping out. Like I remember the first time I asked one of my friends to help me go #1, I was kind of embarrassed. And now,
Like go #1?
yeah, like help me go pee.
Oh, is that what you meant?
Yeah. But like at this stage, all the friends I've had, they've helped me use the bathroom at least one time or another time. And like I don't feel so bad. Like once I remember I was in a situation where I asked a stranger to help me out, and they were still willing to help me out, you know.
Was she cute?
No. I made sure it was a male.
See,
But-
we'll talk about that later.
Okay.
That might have been a bad move for you.
Okay.
So what about, tell us a little about your buddy that you're with, and how did that relationship come about? And obviously, you went from having a college helper to going from Florida to Las Vegas
Yeah.
and helping you one-on-one on a whole trip. That's a big jump. How did that happen?
So I met Alfred in my freshman year of college, and he was one of my caretakers there. And like we really hit it off, you know. We were really close in age, and he really meshed well with my friends there.
So you became buddies.
Yeah, we became buddies, and then COVID hit, and then Alfred went. You know, we had to go back to our homes, you know, for a year, and then I didn't get to see Alfred too much, but we still kept in touch through Instagram and through messages. And I knew, you know, like Alfred didn't mind being a caretaker because that's what he did in college. So when, so like 6 months ago, I reached out to him because I was having trouble keeping consistent caretakers, and I asked him if he could come and help me out. And you know, we've been together ever since. Yeah.
You've been buds.
Yeah.
But again, it's also a social relationship, right? You guys like to hang out.
Yeah, we do. Yeah.
Yeah, I won't share the story you told me about the Florida version of Mardi Gras.
Oh yeah. Oh, you wanna hear it?
It's a little early in the morning, but this is definitely social and building relationships. If you'd like to share, we'd love to listen.
I'd rather not.
Okay, maybe safe to say that you guys are good
Yeah.
buds, and it's good to see you again. I'm glad that you guys are still hanging. And I
Yeah.
think, again, if there's going to be, now that you guys are close friends,
Yeah.
if there was a barrier or a problem, he'd let you know.
Yeah, correct.
And Jen, I see, you know, the seeds of that with you letting your son go out and do his thing. How do you guys mitigate, though, like the risk of that? Like, it's certainly different than an able-bodied child in high school, where your biggest thought is, you know, don't get in the car if someone's been drinking or smoking weed, and, you know, this, that, and the other. But you also have to think, like, okay, these guys are lifting him, they're moving him. They don't realize that, like, if something goes wrong, it's a trip to the hospital. Things could get out of control very quickly. How do you, as a parent, work that out in your mind and let it happen?
Yeah, great question. Ben's closest friend group he's grown up with, and so like they've got to know him really well. As a middle schooler, I think the worst fear is your parents talking to your friends. So Ben's like, no, don't say anything. I probably work through Ben the most to say, hey, like, I need you to be sure you're talking with your friends about this, you know? One day I saw, when he walks home from school to a meeting spot, I saw a kid pushing his chair that I didn't know. And I thought, did his chair break? Like, what's wrong? He has an electric chair he typically would use. And I said, hey, Ben, how come that guy was pushing you up the hill today? And he said, oh, he just kind of wondered how my chair worked, and he asked if it would be okay. And so I probed a little bit more on, like, was this genuine interest? And I think it really was. The kid just wanted to see, like, what does that feel like? Could I help you with that? You know, if there's sometimes that hill is icy, and so kids have had to push him up that way. So I asked him, like, do you feel like it was genuine interest? And he did. And I said, well, then that's awesome. I'm glad he's asking you questions and talking about that. We were just talking with somebody at the conference about wrestling, about how, you know, siblings wrestle. And I've talked about how my other two kids still wrestle with Ben, but they do it in a very modified way. And I've seen his friends doing the same thing. Like they'll still come up and like slap his face a little bit, you know, like rough him up a little bit, but nothing that would ever cause damage. And I think that they understand like there's some serious things that could happen. So like when they're coming up the hill, I said, do they understand if you fell out of your chair, what that would mean? He's like, yes, Mom, they know. So I try to mainly work through him to educate his friends. And then if there's a good situation that I'm sitting and talking with a friend, and there's something that comes up, especially I know a friend that's interested in it, I'll share a little bit more with them. But usually I work through Ben to help educate there, and he seems to find the good and appropriate places to share that.
That's good, and you're teaching him, obviously, too, about his own body and how things are going to work. Point of information for the community, we get a little nervous. We like to call it a power chair. When people say it's an electric chair, we get a little nervous that they're talking about old Sparky. And so, just so you know, we don't want to have any Green Mile moments. Jill, same question, because Anthony does some pretty risky stuff.
Oh my gosh, he does some really risky stuff. And I love what you're doing. I just got to compliment you because, I wish I would have done more of that when he was younger. The difference, though, a little bit was that Anthony had the communication challenges. So, of course, I've been trying to teach him self-advocacy since he was little, but I couldn't necessarily really rely on that communication. So a lot of times I'd backdoor it, and some of the friends that he was hanging out, I'd kind of backdoor it and have a conversation with their parents. So maybe over dinner, they could kind of open up that conversation. I sort of went around about a little bit so as not to embarrass him, right? But yeah, he's done some really crazy things, like a lot of the big climbs that he will do, we would put a helmet on him and actually take him down backwards so that he was, but yeah, we've done some really risky things. He didn't care. He doesn't care. He's like, it's just make it as safe as you possibly can, but I want to do it. And it's still a tricky balance, you know? How do you give that independence and then know that they're going to be okay? And I guess the bottom line is like with any kid, do you know they're going to be okay? They're not always going to be okay. They're just not. I have a lot of parents that ask me when we talk school advice, a lot of parents want a one-to-one, and when I ask them why, a lot of parents will say, so they don't fall on the playground. And I always have to think about that because I'm like, I get that. I totally get that. But how are they going to stop them from falling? Because unless they're holding them the whole time, that's not going to happen. So yeah, it's a tricky balance. I don't have a complete answer. It's like you just have to keep trying to find the balance of knowing that things are going to go wrong, things are going to happen, and you have to have the faith that you'll solve them and you'll fix them and you'll figure it out. But Anthony just doesn't care. He wants to have fun, and if there's risk involved, then so be it, because he feels that having Duchenne is a huge risk anyway. So might as well have fun doing it.
I wonder where he gets those genes.
What did you say?
I wonder where he gets those genes. Just gonna go have a good time.
Yeah.
So, I know. I'm busting your chops.
No,
let's turn it a little bit because, you know, we've kind of talked about how everything is very successful and you can navigate and do this. Let's go the other way, and we've all spoken with families and maybe had some experience ourselves where the childhood in school is a little darker than that, and the child is really having trouble socially and is really struggling either to educate the school what they need to do to help, or, you know, the kid is coming home just saying to the parents, I just can't make any friends. Nobody wants to hang out with me. I'm weird. I'm different. Everybody realizes that I can't do the stuff, so I kind of get ignored. And this probably is a little bit more middle school, because I would guess, but maybe not. I don't want to put thoughts in your head, but what advice would you give to families that are in that situation? And Aditya, if you don't mind, you said you were okay being alone, but I'm sure in middle school, especially when you get a little older, start to have a little different thoughts and feelings about social gatherings. Must have been occasionally difficult.
Yeah.
So I'd like to unpack that a little bit if we could. And just because we have a little bit of time, but our email addresses will be available as always. This will be streamed and it will be shown later as well. So this is always, you can reach out in the future, and we don't have all the answers. We will definitely can hold your hand and help you through some things. But let's talk about what happens when it's not going well. Jill, you look like you're ready.
Yeah, I mean, I love this question because just recently I've been sort of realizing that the parents that I work with that have younger kids with school issues need permission and for somebody to say, you don't have to do it like everyone else is doing it. Like the day you get that diagnosis, you're different, and there's some scary stuff about that, but there is some liberation, okay? Because you don't have to go to a regular school. You don't have to play the sports that your neighbors are playing. You don't have to try to be normal. I think a lot of us, when we get the diagnosis, we try to be normal and do what that normal life looks like. But nowadays, especially with AI and some of the things that are coming out, it's a brand new world. I mean, you can really get creative and set up and create a life that works for everybody in your family and stop worrying about what your neighbors are doing and everybody else in your town or your school is doing, and do something off the charts. I mean, really, you can. You have that permission and that liberation to do that. So I'm not suggesting everybody do that. It's really great when you have other kids and you want them to go to school with their brothers and sisters. But when you get to a point where you're literally forcing something that's not working, I have found that when I have the courage to let go of that vision that I'm forcing that's not working, and I can be brave enough to just go, let's just see what happens when I stop forcing this. That's when a lot of the really magical things have happened, and they've been creative, and they've been not the norm, and we've actually found joy and beauty and a different way of doing it. So sometimes when things are that dark and bad, it's because maybe even your son or the universe or whatever is trying to tell you that this isn't the right direction.
I love that.
I think along those lines, we've tried lots of different things, and I encourage all my kids to try different sports and activities and things that they're interested in. So sometimes when we've been stuck in a place where he doesn't have as much connection, I'm like, what's the next thing? What should we try? Is it an art class? Is it esports? And he usually has to walk into a room where he doesn't know anybody, and that's a little scary. But to say, go try it, and then you have a little bit of a social network, 2 to 4 hours a week where you're with people trying something new, and you may find you have some common ground, and you guys enjoy each other, and you may say, yeah, that was a great class. Glad it's done. Going on to the next thing. So we've tried a lot of different things in our community, and sometimes there are things that middle school boys may not be, an art class is not one that tons of middle school boys will sign up for, but Ben really likes art, and so I'm like, follow what you love to do, go do it, and then you'll find, some connections and some relationships there. So those have then started to lead to other things that we wouldn't have found otherwise.
Yeah, I love that too. Changing up the path, and it's okay to do it different. Aditya, please, from your perspective, what about when things were a little bit more challenging? How did you deal?
When things were challenging, I feel like I just kept on going. Like I looked for solutions and I implemented them. I mean, you have to whatever challenges life throws at you, you still have to keep on going. You can't stop just because you have one challenge. So.
How did you keep on going? You don't get off that easy, man. You're talking to a teacher.
Oh, okay. So how did I keep on going? That's the hard one.
What'd you do? What happens when you just say, you know what? I'm just going back to bed.
I never did that. I just, it's hard to explain where my motivation came from.
You're doing fine.
Because I think my biggest motivation was, I always used to tell myself that you're doing this for older Aditya. You're working hard, all these challenges, younger Aditya will overcome today to make older Aditya's life better. And I feel like my life right now is amazing, and it's all because younger Aditya, he never stopped. He kept going no matter how difficult things were. So the future was my motivation, to get into it, and now I'm here. So I think it worked out pretty well.
I think that's an amazing answer. And I was talking to some families last night, and I said, you know, one thing this disease does is it gives us this mature perception that I think a lot of other people don't have. And we realize that you're delaying these rewards for a time when you probably won't have as much function,
Yeah.
but you're building these skills that are leading up to something,
Yeah.
whether it be, you know, being carried down the Grand Canyon and having these adventures, or working on stuff that's going to be applied to the moon, docking. Like, I'm not kidding, this kid is moon docking. You got to talk to him about it later. It's unbelievable. I don't even understand it. It's like way beyond my capabilities, but like, you kept going because you knew something was coming up and something was going to happen. And I think it's a great takeaway to realize that, again, there's nothing wrong with your family. There's nothing wrong with the way things are going. It's different, and it's certainly not a life that you had planned for, but I don't think there's too many people that can say, this is exactly where I thought I was going to be when I was 7 years old. And that goes for major league athletes and people that act and people that have invented things, and us. This is it. So you navigate it with the way that you think is the best way to keep your family happy, functioning, and moving forward. I know we're almost at time. Yep, and I have a little housekeeping, but again, we could keep going. I want to thank the panel. This was a great conversation, and the only regret I have is that you guys didn't talk to each other more about stuff, but we can unpack that at a future time. Please, thank you to Aditya, Jill, and Jen. Great job, thanks. Proud to know all of you and proud to call you guys my friends. Speaking of friends, housekeeping. Okay. Patrick, I'm sending a drink to your room. Wait, that's a different note, sorry. Okay, grandparents' lunch. Brian Denger, this is you. Grandparents' lunch moved to Tuscany room, 12:45 to 1:45. As you know from walking around, the Tuscany room is right next to the panhandle of Florida, so you have to head off. It's about 4,000 miles in one direction. Sarepta Open House Breakout 1, 12:45 to 2:45. Okay, again, for those of you in the back that old school write things down, Sarepta Open House in Breakout 1, 12:45 to 2:45. Okay, Breakout 1 is over at Circus Circus. That's in Colorado. And then the grandparents' lunch moved to Tuscany room, 12:45 to 1:45. Those of you that are able-bodied will also be happy to know that at this conference, nobody needs to go to the physical fitness center because you get 50,000 steps a day walking from your hotel room to here, right? Okay, so I could do this all morning, and this is where I'm glad Pat and the leadership is not in the room because I don't always read the cue cards, and that gets them a little nervous. So do we have a small break before Dr. Al? Dr. Al, Mr. Dudley is, okay. So I think we'll excuse our panel. One more round of applause for these fine humans.